Let's see how long it takes for Twitch to catch on. You're streaming, right? Yeah, you're streaming. Come on, let's stream again. Well, given that pink hair is automatically watching me, I think I'm probably online. Alright, so that was fun. I'm going to go ahead and post to Twitter that I am streaming. Sorry I'm 2 or 3 minutes late. I was doing Liam's mission in Mass Effect Andromeda, and it took 5 minutes longer than I thought it would. I'm streaming some game dev. Come watch if you want. It's gonna be relaxing. And let's turn the heat up just a touch. Alright. So I don't think there's any problems with the audio or anything like that. I think we're all good. If there are problems with the audio and all that, I'm sure someone will let me know. Maybe that someone will be you. Either way, what we're going to want to do today is work our way through some of the stuff that I've been working on. I'm looking over here at OBS, and for some reason, the mic and the auxiliary, the mic and the desktop audio, have switched places. I think that they're the same, but the mixer is listing them in the opposite order for some reason. That's kind of weird. Well, whatever floats your boat. So I did a couple of things over the course of the week, but nothing in the core game. For example, I've been working on the way in which colonies and cities will be created, and I think it's really cool. I think I've come up with something really neat, but doesn't look very impressive right now. Basically, the idea is there'll be a core city, right? And then there will be an outlying 6 hexes of add-ons that you can choose. And that's much simpler than the previous method I was going to use, but it also means that you can quickly and easily build bases. In addition, things like neighbors will matter. So, for example, the solar panels give a bonus to neighbors' production. So these 2 greenhouses would have a bonus. That combines with zooming out, and then there'll be 6 more larger hexes outside, which you can put larger elements on. And then when you want to grow the city can grow to fill all of these hexes, and then you have the 6 hexes that were your big hexes, and then you zoom out and you get 6 more hexes. So you can steadily increase in size and do things like large-scale projects where you're trying to terraform a whole planet. And it should work pretty naturally. It also integrates well with the battle system, so that'll be fun. And that wasn't really what I spent all of my time on, but it was the major change that I did. I also started working on some spaceship stuff, but I don't know whether or not that's what you want to watch me spend my time on. Although if you are here to watch me model stuff, let me know, because I can certainly do that. I think what I'm here to do today is to make our breakdowns, our stress disorders, into something more fun. Right now what happens is people who suffer from stress breaks will break a random component, but then there's nothing else. It's just, oh, we broke a component, we're done. That's obviously not good enough, because the whole idea is that's going to be a trade-off. It's a scenario where you can wander around the ship and do stuff. So the first step in doing that is actually allowing the game to pause. Right now it doesn't pause very well, so we're going to go ahead and fix that up. The universe is responsible for the passage of time, and so we're going to add in some pausing capacities here in the universe. So we already have a couple of time-related elements. For example, we've got hours per second here. But what we want to do is make it so that we can pause and then return to the previous speed. What's more is that there are a couple of things that may want to pause the game, so we need to keep track of who is pausing and why. The 2 basic options of doing that are to have a bunch of bools that are paused, paused because you're in a menu, paused because you're in a conflict, paused because there's a pop-up trying to describe something to you. rather than coming up with every possible situation where you could be paused, it makes more sense for us to allow arbitrary mono behaviors to add and remove themselves from the pause stack. So let's go ahead and create the pause stack. So we'll create a region time flow, and then we will also end that region here. Public, make that not even public, we'll make it, yeah, public is fine, I guess. No, we should make it protected. Protected list mono behavior, pausers, equals new list mono behavior. Public, void, pause, mono behavior, pauser, yeah. And we can say if pausers.contains pauser. So if it doesn't contain the pauser, then add it. And in this way, an arbitrary number of pausers, which can be any mono behavior, can be added to the stack. And similarly, they'll be responsible for removing themselves from the stack. Like so. We say if pausers.contains pauser, then remove it. Here we'll go ahead and we'll say debug.log mono behavior, sorry, it's pauser.name plus paused the game. Then down here we will say debug.log unpaused the game, but we have a couple of things we need to take a look for. If pausers.count equals 0, then that's what we say. Otherwise, we say unpaused, but it's paused for other reasons. Then what we need is a public void paused, sorry, public bool paused, which is a getter and a setter. So get, if we go ahead and return pausers.count is greater than 0. And then when we're setting, if value debug.log warning cannot pause using universe.paused. And this should be a static, shouldn't it? Static. This should all be static. Can you have a protected static? You might have to have a private static. We'll take a look in a minute here. I can't remember. Cannot pause using universe.pause. Needs a mono behavior arg for tracking. Use universe.pause. Else debug.log warning unpaused with brute force may confuse paused elements, may confuse pausers. And then we just say pausers.clear. Like so. And in this way, we can easily check whether or not we're currently paused. The other thing we have to do is when time passes, we're going to need to allow ourselves, so we're going to make this into time pass. So then we'll put time pass up here in our region. So protected void time pass. There we go. So this will allow us to pass the time, but we say if paused, then return, because it was paused, right? Otherwise, we pass the time away, and we update all of our ships for hours past. Notice that when we say hour plus equals hour past, you might think that that's not doing anything, but it actually has a bunch of invokes all over the place. So we're going to want to be aware that increasing the hour doesn't just add the hour. That's a setter that has a whole bunch of extra functionality. I am not 100% sure whether I can be heard because I haven't received any hellos or comments yet, but Sundays are usually pretty quiet, so maybe that's fine. Maybe it's all working fine. I have an audio readout in OBS that says that it's working, and I guess that's good enough for me. So now what we have is a situation where we can pause and unpause time as long as any mono behavior adds itself to the pause list. Now, in order to do that, we need to have the ability for mono behaviors to call that function without our direct intervention, and there's a bunch of reasons for that. The biggest reason is that we want to be able to set it up as an event, so it would be difficult for us to continually pass that as an event if we didn't have a function to just do it for us. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the player controls base class here. This player control base class, we're going to give it a pause and an unpause. Public void pause, bool pause. And what this will do is this will actually call the universe. So if pause, universe.pause this, else universe.unpause this. And that will allow us to call pause with an event. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, for example, we've got this help screen back here. If we call up the help screen, we would really like it to actually pause the game while we're looking at the help screen. So to do that, we can have this situation where on gain control and on lose control will count to pause and unpause the game. Nothing like that is needed at the moment because the game is going to be paused when we start here in our construction mode, so there's not a big concern there. Speaking of which, we'll go ahead and use the speed override in the universe. There it is. 0. The universe right now doesn't have any quick key watchers for increasing and decreasing the speed of the universe. This is where that would go if we had them, so let's go ahead and add them in. If input.getKeyDown, we can either search for a key or we can search for a axis, a button. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up our project settings input. And you can see that there are a bunch of extra ones here, but none of them are time acceleration. So we're going to have to add in a new one for time acceleration. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll go ahead and just clone one of these guys. That's fine. And we'll call this time accel. The positive button, we're just going to make it period, and the negative button, we're going to make comma. Those can be customized and changed later as we'd like. So over here, what we do is we say if get button down time accel. I don't think it takes any other arguments now. So if someone pressed the button, and this is get button press, I guess it's get button down, yeah, because get button is held. So get button down is when it actually gets tapped, and it won't get called every frame. Good. So if we have this, then that means that we're either going to be accelerating or decelerating. So if input.getButton or getAxis, this is a dumb trick, by the way, in case you're wondering, because both button and axis call against the same setup. So right now, when I say get button down time accel, it asks, did someone press any time accel button, whatever the buttons might be? And then I say input.getAxis. What that does is it gives me the value of the axis, so I can tell whether or not someone pressed a positive button or a negative button. See? So in that case, I can tell whether we're trying to accelerate or decelerate. Here we're going to say if hours per second is less than 0.1 f, then hours per second equals 0.1f, and that's necessary because there are times when I manually set it to 0, and obviously that's not great. Else hours per second times equals 2. Now we can polish this later, not too concerned about it right now. Else, so now in this case it's we're decelerating. So we say hours per second divided by equals 2. There we go. And that should allow us to quickly make it so that time passes or doesn't pass here in our game. But there are a couple of issues with this. One is that if it's paused and we accelerate time, what do we want to do? Well, chances are pretty high that if we want to accelerate time while we're paused, we're trying to unpause. So in that case, what we're going to do is we're going to force it. So we say if universe.paused, I guess we can just say paused. If paused, then paused equals false. Else, if hours per second. There we go. So that should do it, but this is a brute force unpause. So brute force unpause. There we go. So what does this mean? This means that whenever we try and accelerate time, we're going to accelerate time even if we're paused. If we try to decelerate time, if we're paused, it'll still decelerate the time we would be moving forward if we were unpaused, so when we unpause, we'll be moving slower. Whew. So that should do. Let's go ahead and have this. We don't have a pop-up in this view for the universe. Oh, Matacon says, finally joined the Space Engineers community bandwagon and began making my own set of station parts. That aside, any progress on your own station pieces in the galactic line? Sort of. So you missed this because I talked about it for about 4 seconds right at the beginning, but let me show you what my plans are for space bases. Sorry, land-based bases, colonies. If we go over to the moon base set, I can show you. So I did a lot of work with buildings and setting up buildings, which you might remember, but that was too complicated for my needs. It would have been a game on its own. So what I decided to do was to go with a hex-based approach. Let me go ahead and just set this up a little bit so that it's so that it makes a little bit more sense here. So if we scale this up to 333, that'll do. And then we can delete this guy. I don't need him. And then we duplicate this guy and then move him over here. Actually, let's not move him. Let's negative the number here. Nope, that's not it at all, is it? Oh, that's fine. We'll move him. And then we select both of those, like that, and duplicate. We can rotate around the center. And then we can duplicate and rotate around the center again. There we go. Of course, right now, some of these are hidden, so let's just grab the ones in back and drag them up, because that's something that will happen automatically later on. But for right now, it's not automatic. So basically what the idea here is, rather than having a bunch of buildings, each one of which has to be carefully placed, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this double hex arrangement. So basically what happens is you pick a colony, and in this case I have built a T0 base colony here, and it gets put in the center, and it's like, in this case it houses like 5 people. It's a small colony. And then what you can do is you can place elements in the surrounding 6 hexes to customize your colony and expand it. So I've got 2 greenhouses, a solar panel array, a little bit of regolith mining, a landing spot, and some radio antennas. And those all have a value in our colony. If you zoom out further, you can use larger elements, which I haven't built yet, but here's an example of the sort of size we're talking about. And then you could just use larger elements that would have the same basic idea behind them, but they're a huge scale, right? But then, if you want to, you can upgrade your small colony to a larger colony, which would take up this much space. And so these inner 6 elements would be swallowed by your new colony, and you would get 6 more really, really big hexes, which you could put more larger stuff on, and then really, really big hexes if you keep expanding until you're large enough that you can completely change the nature of the world via terraforming or whatever. And Detroit Gamers stopped in to say hi. Hello, I'm explaining a little bit of gameplay that doesn't exist yet using temporary models, so it doesn't look great at the moment. But in that way, we can allow our AIs or our players to build facilities and bases really, really easily. And there's enough complexity to it that they can be customized in a large variety of ways. There are lots of fun little things we can do involving resources that are available in specific tiles, terraforming elements, and all sorts of stuff. And it should work well. Now, for space bases, like orbital bases, I think that we'll be using mostly customized ship parts. It'll be very, very similar to making a ship. I just won't be able to go anywhere. Either way, I've been only doing a little bit of modeling work on this stuff because it takes a while to do this modeling, and it's just like blocking stuff out. Trying to figure out how things will work in the long run. I don't know if that answers your question, Matacon, but basically, over the past week, I've gone through about 800 different possible options as to the best way to handle this sort of situation where I don't want the players to be bogged down in complexity, and I don't want the game, I don't want to have to spend a year just developing that part of the game, especially since it's a rather minor part. So, I hope that clears it up. Obviously, I will have to make a set of modules for space stations. I don't have any yet. I have some that are just tests. I have that fun Japanese-style space station. That's a fun test, but it needs to be redone. And a big part of the reason I didn't build any yet is because those are largely interiors. Space stations have a lot of interior space when compared to a spaceship. And I hadn't really worked out how dense I needed my interiors to be. I hadn't really worked out if I was going to be doing first person or not. Since I finally decided not to, then that's that. I can now develop space stations and starships as I'd like. I am developing a new kind of starship, just blocking it out here, an aerospace, SSTO starship, and I think that that's going to be a cool ship, but I haven't really gotten very far yet. As you can see, I'm still working out the basics of the engine. All right, so I've just finished making it. Hey, Evil Luigi. People are starting to stop in. So I've just made it so that we can pause the game and we can change the time at which time passes, change the rate at which time passes. And I think we want to test that. But the thing is that if we go into our game world, I don't believe there is currently a display that actually reflects the passing of time. So if we, did I see an unreachable code? Hold on. That might have been back from when we were doing something else. So if we create a ship and then we pull it into the game world, by the way, this is much, much faster in the release version. The debug version has a whole bunch of things that slow it down. And from Malsbeer stopped by. Oh, we're getting quite a few viewers. We're up to 6, which is actually dangerously close to a new record. So if we were to launch into the game world here, although time is passing, and you can tell because of the way that the stress is climbing, that's 1 day, each day gives us that stress there. But we can't see what time it is because there's no clock here in the universe, and so that's something we're going to want to do. You can see that they are breaking stuff. It's turning black as they break it, so that part's working as intended. But what we need to do is when they break something, what we want to do is pause the game, go into the game, and allow you to figure out what you want to do about that situation. Oh man, they broke the nuclear reactor. Shouldn't break the nuclear reactor, we need that. I mean, now all we're down to is a couple of fuel cells, and that's not going to be very nice. Wow, this ship is really busted. Look at all these broken parts. That's what happens when you do not put enough entertainment on your spaceship. Evil Luigi is making jokes about how 6 is such a big number for me. I have a very, very niche stream, and I don't like advertise or anything, so I'm not too worried about getting a large number of viewers. I'm pretty happy because my viewers tend to be really good at making suggestions, whether technical or artistic. So what we need to do now is create an object that pauses the game and throws us into a scenario. Well, good news, I've made it so we can pause the game. All we have to do is create that object that understands that it is a scenario and we are playing through the scenario. So let's go ahead and just create a new script for that. One thing we're going to want to do, I just realized this, we're going to want to have a setup that will allow us to test this without having to go through this load ship every single time. So let's just grab the monkey bars. Grind, grind, grind. There we are. If we pause the game, we can take this whole ship here and just drop it into our prefab list. So we'll have a temporary prefabs here. Here's a ship. We have the Agrippa example. This is going to be the monkey bars example. The Agrippa example is so out of date that it sample ship monkey bars. The Agrippa is so far out of date that it doesn't even run anymore. If we drop it in, you can see that it has some of the same parts that we're currently using, but it doesn't have any of the interiors worked out. It doesn't have any of the actual functionality worked out, so that's not going to be of any use. We'll just delete that. Boom. We'll go over into our test site here. Garden, that's what it was. I don't think we have to save it. There's nothing we did. So here you can see that there's a missing prefab, and that was where the Agrippa used to be. So we're going to drop in our new sample ship here. Boom. Delete this. And there should be a button here. Debug ship. Clunk. When we select that, it means that the ship will only appear if it's the only ship. And it won't try to appear if it is... if there is a more complicated situation. It looks like that is not the right solution. For some reason, all of these parts are hidden. What's going on here? Why is the mesh renderer not properly rendering? Is this a... we're in the scene view. We should be able to see it in the scene view. This is strange. Oh, it's the temporary meshes. You see these? These temporary meshes don't exist in permanent memory. So when I saved the prefab, what I did is I saved temporary meshes, or rather I saved it with references to temporary meshes. And the result is, of course, that there are no... there's no holdover there. We have to regenerate the ship if we want to do that. To be honest, this is good enough. We don't have to worry too much about it because we're only using this to debug our worldview. And if it looks stupid, that's okay. People who show up here and think about the fact that the game looks stupid, they can tell me it looks stupid, and I'll show them the version that works. But another solution is to save the ship's long title, you know, the thing you get when you tell it to serialize, and then we can import from that. And let's spend a couple of seconds setting that up, because that is the way that we should be doing it. You can see this test to serialize text here. What we're going to do is this ship, if it is a debug ship, we're going to want to deserialize from that. So if we go up here into awake, doop, 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 doop. Here we say debug. Here it is. So if ships.count is greater than 0 and we are a debug ship, then we want to self-destruct. Else, debug ship, load from our saved elements. So that would be deserialize. What is it called? Test to deserialize. Missions need work. Need to rip all that out. It's ancient. Sit engineer, highlight, save, parts, serialize, pre-deserialization, post-deserialization. Okay, so I screwed something up here. Oh, that's because it's not in the ship. It's in the deserializer. Doop. There we go. So what we want to do here is remember the element test deserialize. There it is. Test to deserialize is in fact what it is. So here in awake, we're going to call that test to deserialize, and that should allow it to work. Test to deserialize. Unfortunately, we do not have the sample ship monkey bars set up correctly, so let's go back over into everybody's favorite construction facility. Don't bother saving that. So Evil Luigi's restarting Firefox because his tabs don't work right. And Matacon I irradiated my crew. I turned them purple. Now, if you are a good guesser, you can probably tell why they turned purple. Every one of the crew members has their own runtime generated material for their skin. And the fact that I don't actually save that material to the hard drive means that if I try to save that as a prefab and then load it later, those runtime materials are replaced by an error, which is that bright purple. Oh, else if debug ship. I'm so smart. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our good friend, the monkey bars, like so. Grind. And then we're going to want to serialize it. So we can take this and then we can say ship test deserialize, serialize to JSON. There it is. And this is the serialization that we can use for our test ship in the other world. So, oh, message truncated. Well, we can always take it straight from the file. So if we go over here into our resources, user data, default, this is the same data, and all we have to do is find the correct ship, and it's the last one, etc. Fine, we'll open it. Can we just drop it in here? No, you didn't like that? All right, sounds like it's going to be more annoying than it's worth, so we're not going to bother. We're just going to leave it like that for now. Whatever. The version we've got that is vaguely functional will do, and I will work on the rest later some other time. Nope, cancel. Okay, we're back here, and what we're going to want to do is disable that thing I just put in, because we don't have that set up right yet, so that's fine. We'll leave it like this for now. We'll deal with it later. But what we need to do is have a visual which reflects the passing time here in our universe. And that's, of course, going to be a UI visual here in the universe system. So we have the universe itself, which is a canvas, see? So we're going to go ahead and put in our elements right here. And what's that going to be? It's going to be a panel which adheres to the upper left at 0, 1, and then we're going to go ahead and make it like 5, 5, 240, something like that should do. Does it have to be -5? -5. Like that. That's going to be where we stick our current universe, our important values. So we will call this the time panel. And then we will create inside of our time panel a text box. Boom. Which we will left justify and center justify, give it an offset of 5. Make its font size 16. Give it a nice dark color like that. 18. That's better. And then we're going to want to call this time. That's not how you spell time. Time. Blah. And so how are we going to get that to hook up to the universe? Well, if we take a look at the universe, it's got a couple of elements to it that we're not currently using. So if we take a look at this, it doesn't actually have those values set up anymore. Was there a... Oh, on date change. This is a date change. I think that'll work. I think that I implemented this differently a while ago. Oh, this is way back in the day. Also, the mission economy boost stuff, this doesn't even need to exist. It's not of any value. We should just delete that entirely. These are all bad. Shall we go ahead and clean up the old mission stuff while we're doing this, just to get as distracted as possible? Because now that's going to give us some error messages. See? So what we're going to want to do is get rid of these mix-in component missions too. So if we take a look, mix-in mission component should go. Boom. What sort of errors we got now? So we got the ship mission abstraction, that can go. Missions can go. We're just ripping the missions out because they don't make that. We changed how we do these, and it makes no sense to keep griping about it since they don't exist anymore. Meta clean, get rid of the missions. Evil Luigi says, do you use a new font in MonoDevelop? It looks slimmer. I zoomed in, and sometimes when you zoom in, the fonts don't zoom in the same horizontally and vertically. Their kerning gets screwed up. So I wouldn't be surprised if it is slimmer today, just because I zoomed into a slightly different size than usual. There we go. All right, so now we've cleared that out, and what we need to do is have the universe allow us to keep track of what we're doing. Here we have this on-day-change invoke. We have a couple of options with how we want to do this. One option is that we have a function that just spits out the current time whenever it changes. Do we want that to be an hour time or a day time is the question. I think an hour time is good for some things and is bad for others. We'll go ahead and do both. So down here in our time flow region, we're going to want to have a public string event time changed. Now this is on a local object. This is on an actual object rather than a static object. And that's important because we need to be able to assign it in the inspector. And if it's a static object, we can't assign it in the inspector. So here in TimePass, here in hours, I guess, what we're going to want to do is live.onDateChange.invoke. So we've already got something like that on date change. Oh, there, it's already there. So there's no reason to worry about that. We'll go ahead and not do what I was doing because we already did it. I thought we had already done it. I was going to re-implement it the exact same way. So when we talk about what the actual time is, you can see that what we're building is a string. T plus day and hour and then minutes. We're going to make this a little bit different because we're going to want to change our function depending on how fast time is passing. If hours per second is less than 4, then we'll want to add in these values. That way, if we're moving sufficiently fast, it'll just give us the day. Otherwise, it'll give us the hour as well. And what we're going to want to do here in the universe is find that string event. There it is. Drop in our text box, and then set our text to accept it, like so. And now when we hit play, you can see that the time is passing. Unfortunately, our crew members are all screwed up, so their stress isn't increasing at all, so we can't test that right now. We'll have to actually load a ship into this. But what we can do is test the acceleration and the deceleration. Now, in the game that, in the prototypes, what I did is I took different songs, and as you accelerated or decelerated, you'd use a different song and have slightly different visual cues, depending on how fast or how slow you were going. I think we're probably going to do that again, but that's not my focus today, so we're going to skimp on it for now. Instead, we're going to go ahead and test out how this integrates with a ship that's working properly. Alright, let's spawn into the game world here. T0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and break something, would you? Thank you. Oh, by the way, I have invented a fix for the problem of breaking ship components that don't actually break. When you are trying to get a list of ship components that are working or broken, we're just going to exclude the ones that can't be working or broken. So that shouldn't be too hard. And for that purpose, we're going to go over here to ship component and create a new value. Right now we have functional as a value. Where is it? There it is. We're going to go ahead and have public bool can function. And then this is going to just be a if mixins.count.length is greater than 0, or return mixins.length is greater than 0. So if you've got mixins, then you can function. If you don't have mixins, you can't function. For things that don't have any function, we don't want to sit there and break them and unbreak them, because that doesn't make any sense. They can't be broken and they can't unbreak. So we're going to make sure that that happens by over here in get functional components. If component dot can function, so if you can't function, just continue. It doesn't matter whether you're searching for functional parts or dysfunctional parts. If it can't function, it doesn't show up on either of those. Perfect. That way we won't break any more pure structural elements. Fmalsbeer says, how about breakable? I use breakable in a lot of different ways, so I'm going to go ahead and go with this for now. I don't think it's a big deal either way. That's not a part, not a value that's going to get called very often. That said, we should probably put in a comment. So if a part has no mixins, it cannot break or be repaired via normal means. And then here we'll say, if all mixins are working, it's fully functional. Perfect. Returns the first broken mixin, first non-functional mixin. Huzzah! All right, so now we've cleaned up some of the damage, but we still don't have a thing that pops into existence in order to prevent the player from speeding off with a broken part. The player needs to have the option to do stuff, and that includes fixing the part, it includes talking to people, it includes all sorts of stuff. So therefore, we're going to have a new kind of player controller, which is going to be called a scenario. Let's go down to scripts and into player controller elements here. We'll create a new C# script called a scenario. Erdroy stopped in. Hello, Erdroy. And this is going to be a player control. And I think that we're currently using a... are we using the player control? I'm just checking to see whether I need a... Okay, so we're not currently using a namespace for these, which is kind of iffy, but whatever. So the scenario player control, This is pauses the game world and allows the player to interact with people and objects. So for this to work, what we need to do is override on gain control and on lose control. No, it's on enable. So on override on enable. When we are enabled, we want to pause the universe. And override on disable. Universe.unpause this. There we go. So how does a scenario work? Well, we have certain things that have just broken that are of note. We have concerns. It could be any number of people and any number of things. So we have two options. We can either have some kind of interface, some kind of scenarioable interface, or we can have a bunch of different arrays of things. So I think that a bunch of different arrays of things is certainly a better way to start, because adding in universal interfaces, they are often going to be used in different ways, so the universal interface really won't help very much. So we'll have a public social brain public avatar.socialbrain. Let's go ahead and add the avatar namespace here. Public list social brain participants. Let's call these stressors. Because there's two kinds of participants. There's the ones that are just hanging around that you can see, and then there are the ones that are causing problems. Problem causers. And then we'll have a public list social brain participants. Oh, I'm getting used to doing this and I don't need to anymore. You need to do that on static ones, but not on public ones. All right, so those are the things that we're going to be participating. But I think what we're going to need to have here is a public class. What do I want to call it? I guess it should have its own file. So let's go ahead and come up with an event directory here. There we are. We're going to want to save this just temporarily, close this whole thing down, and we'll drag it from player controller into there because it's much more important than just one of n player controllers. There we go. Let's go ahead and add in our own namespace. Namespace scenario. There we go. And we're going to need to create some support elements. For example, a new class that we will call scenario event. This is not going to be a mono behavior, but it is going to be serializable. And of course, it's going to be in that namespace. So the scenario event keeps track of something that needs to be resolved. So it will also probably descend from it a couple of times. Let's go ahead and add in some commentary here. If Malsbeer says, do you have a bigger plan worked out for your development, or you just go step by step and see how it works out? I've got a pretty solid plan for the framework that I'm building. There's a lot of space for me to just dick around. Like, it doesn't matter whether I create a new spaceship now or in a month. But in terms of how the overall progression works, I know exactly what pieces need to be worked on in what order. And I am. If you see me coding, I'm almost certainly either bug fixing or coding my way forward on a pretty rigid plan. It's only when I start to just do random 3D modeling stuff that it is open to my own vagaries. A scenario event is something that has just happened and needs to be dealt with. Typically, a stressed out astronaut breaking something. So in order to do this, what we're going to want to have is a public social brain. Oh, look, it doesn't exist. Using avatar. Public social brain. Participant, cause. Cause. And then we want to have, for now, we'll probably make this different later, but for now we're going to just have a ship component target. Later on we'll change how that works, but that should work for now. New public scenario event, social brain, cause, ship component, target. This.cause equals cause, this.target equals target. Basic stuff here. Now, the only question is whether or not that needs to have a neutral variant. No, guess not. Because sometimes when you have a serializable object, some kinds of game engines require you to have a neutral initializer, a neutral constructor. But this one doesn't seem to. So this should be okay. So this happens, and we know that there's something going on. So over here, we can, instead of causing this problem causers thing, we're going to have a list of scenario events. Oh, I don't have to say new there. Like so. So if we pop on over into our universe, just... Oh, come on. Here we go. When we come over here, what we can do is we can have ourselves a new object. We'll just create an empty one here, which we will call the... well, actually, it would be better if it was a canvas, now wouldn't it? So assets, create... No, sorry, game object, UI, canvas. Okay, so we'll call this the scenario. And then when we drop the scenario into the scenario, like this, we can see that there is a list of events, and if we add to this list of events, we get the option to add in these values, and these will save and load according to our needs. Of course, we do have some characters in this game world, so let's just go ahead and grab one. You. There's the social brain for it. So if we grab the scenario and we drop the social brain into that position, we can then also pick a ship part. For example, this fuel tank. Drop it in. And then we have set up an event. Now the question is, will this serialize properly? So I've just saved, and we're going to pop on over to the moon base, and then pop back over to the garden, and check and see whether that saved. Yay, it saved! So it serializes fine, even without a neutral constructor. That's good to know. For participants, we can go ahead and just add all 4 participants from this little ship here. So let's just find them in this mess. There are only 3? There are more than 3. There are 4, so which one am I missing? 1, 2, 3, 4. Huh. Don't know what I was doing that I couldn't see it. Whatever, let's drop these people into our participants queue. And then we're going to have one more, and that's going to be the avatar character. Public social brain avatar. And the avatar is going to be the one that the player is theoretically controlling. Boom. Erdroy says it'll be saved, but there may be some problems with deserializing because it will need to create an instance, but it can't find, but it can't because there's no default CTOR. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, but I didn't see a problem right then. It worked fine. It serialized and deserialized fine. I have a sneaking suspicion that what they're doing is forcing in a neutral constructor behind the scenes. Alright, so we've got a bunch of bright purple crew members who are now participating in an event. Now, the event will pause and unpause the world when it pops into existence. So if we hit play, we should see that time does not pass. And it doesn't, see? In fact, it so doesn't pass that it's currently stuck on the default thing that I put in. But that's fine. So when we get an event, then the event pops up and pauses the universe. And we have to try and figure out what we're going to want to do. So what sort of situation are we going to be talking about when we're talking about this universe? We're probably going to want to say, these people broke these things or something like that. But it may be that we would like the player to have to figure that stuff out on their own. This is a more complicated situation, and I'm not entirely sure what the best path forward is. I tried to think about it over the week, but I had this ear infection, and it was giving me this incredibly loud tinnitus or tinnitus, and I literally couldn't think. So I haven't made any progress on that front. What sort of visual do we want to talk about here? There are a lot of options. One option is to put them in spacesuits and have them near the broken part, if it's not an internal part. Another option is to go and do some 3D modeling so that I don't go off in the wrong direction. And to be honest, I think that might be better at this point. What do you folks think? Should I be doing some programming or some 3D modeling to move forward with today? Because the programming is going to be loosey-goosey. I'm not sure visually how I want the player to interact with these events. I can try and work it out here on mic, but that's not going to be very fun to listen to. Because basically, there's some data that the player has to be presented with, and then the player also has to be allowed to uncover that data. There are some pieces of data that the player should just be told, and there are other pieces of data the player wants to uncover. There are actions that the player is able to take, some with people and some with objects. And then there are situations where the player is going to be told something, but not until they click on a character. Everyone's saying it doesn't matter. They just want to hear my beautiful voice. All right, fine. You can hear my beautiful voice. We'll go do modeling for a little while. This is the Aeroskip T1 Corvette that I'm working on right now. It's an aerospace Corvette. Here are some parts for it that I have started. I've got this cockpit, and then I've got some stuff over here that's just in early phases. I went ahead and modeled a jet engine, and I also modeled the Sabre engine. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a very personal variant for the Sabre engine that will look good in our futuristic space world. Because the Sabre engine is basically a wilted sausage, and it doesn't look very good at all. Some of this stuff will have to be rebuilt, as much as I like to say that this is what I want it to look like. It's just prototyped together. For example, this little lip here has caused me an incredible number of problems. This stupid little thing coming off the front here, and that's obviously not going to cut it. Also, I have to wonder whether or not I want the front to be more re-entry safe. Now, the thing is, when you're re-entrying with something that has some actual wings, the idea is that the bottom is heavily shielded, and you come in with your ass to the wind, so you burn up below. I'm using my hand like you can see it. And that's something that the space shuttle does as well. If you look at the space shuttle, it's heavily armored underneath so that you can get that braking force of using your fuselage and your wings to just slow you down. The thing about ultra-fast SSTO vehicles is that they don't necessarily have to do that. They're going to be traveling at like Mach 5, Mach 4 on the way up anyway. I think that's probably okay. I think that doing an armored underbelly is probably the best option. But we're not working on the armored underbelly right now. We are working on the idea of an engine. Now, the SSTO engines, the Sabre engine is the only one like that right now. This is what they look like. They look like this wilted sausage thing. And if you take a close look, you can see that it is... Oh, I don't need this one anymore. This one. If you take a close look, you can see that it is bent. And that's actually how it's supposed to be. The bend is actually not severe enough in this version. But it's not a very interesting thing to try and stick on your spaceship. So the question becomes, how do we turn this into something interesting? And the basic answer to that is always make it shaped like a cereal box. Because cereal boxes make for great modular shapes. So in order to do that, what I've done is I've started to work out the idea that our rear exhaust, instead of being this super round 4-engine setup, we can have this more horizontal 3-engine setup. Tork came in and said, well, I clearly missed something, new ship manifest. Yeah, I couldn't think very straight over the course of the past week, so right now I'm working on a new ship, the first SSTO ship in our repertoire. Of course, you can also make full-on spaceships with it if you'd prefer, but right now I'm working on the SSTO engine. The way that these SSTO engines work is they use this ultrasonic or hypersonic baffle up front, and that creates a really, really nice compression so that the air that comes in is just right for use with an intake. So it can operate at low speeds, or in the upper atmosphere at high speeds, or even with no atmosphere at all by just injecting oxygen straight into your chamber. And because of that, it's not a turbofan. It doesn't have a turbine pushing air. Instead, you're burning fuel, and you're sending fuel out the back like that in a much more aggressive manner. But because it can use oxidizers found in the atmosphere, you don't have to burn nearly as much fuel. Now, this isn't a full-on solution. There are lots of planets where there's not going to be any oxidizers. But even then, you can still use some kind of fan to blow air around and either slow yourself down or whatever, VTOL land. And so those are the parts we're going to be building. Begin Attack Run says SSTO, and then Teoric explains that it's a single-staged orbit. Yeah, the idea here is we're building a space plane. We're building a modular space plane. And it's going to look a little bit like, just because it happens to be the right design. If you've ever looked at Mass Effect Andromeda's new ship, the penis ship, it looks a lot like that. And that's how space planes actually look, which is why the Mass Effect Andromeda people built it like that. The fact that it has landing legs only in the tiny little back region makes very little sense. We're not going to be doing that, but same basic idea. Yep, space sausage to orbit. It's an SSTO. So we have this intake, and we've got this exhaust, and the exhaust is more of a squashed shape, and this is more ideal for creating our cereal box-shaped modules. So when we're creating an engine, what we're going to want to do is create an engine that looks more like a cereal box than a sausage. And that's not too hard, but we're going to want to duplicate these. So we're going to name these. This will be cereal box thrusters. And we're going to duplicate this and put the original over there somewhere. We don't need this anymore. Boom, gone. And this is going to be our intake. So we're going to call this hypersonic intake, and then we will, just as before, duplicate it and move the original over there somewhere. And that way, if we screw up, we don't have to worry about reverting or anything. Some people aggressively handle these sorts of explorations with saving the file as a new name. I prefer to keep the old stuff around because usually there's like something I want to keep and something I don't want to keep and something I want to revert. So I just create duplicates of everything and then delete the duplicates. That does mean that when I unhide stuff, it gets credited, but that's a small price to pay. So the basic idea here is we're going to want to have this move up here, and then we're going to want to have this exhaust rotate like 30 degrees down and be positioned something like this. I guess that's probably a little large, so let's shrink it just a touch here. Something like this. And the idea here is we're going to try and make this look good. As good as I can, at any rate. I'm not the best modeler in the world. So we'll delete this, and we're going to go ahead and use a shawl, some kind of overcoat, and we're going to go ahead and make that a cube. So if we put in the cube like so, we are currently doing x-axis mirroring, so we don't need the whole cube. Just delete this part here. And delete this edge, and delete this edge. Boom. Move this back. So you can see that we have a set of shawls going on here. We've got several different shawls. Our rear thrusters have the three main thrusters with a ring of exhausts around them, and the exhausts have a ring around them. One thing to note is that these shouldn't be like this. There is one thing I still have to do here, and that is to select these like so. And then what you can do is hit Control-Shift-Alt-S. Easy to remember. And move this like this. That didn't work. Control-Shift, yeah, it did. Control-Shift-Alt-S. And this is skew. Skewing is much better for most of our needs. Oh, that's why it didn't. It looked so skewing allows us to move this element into place as an angled export, as an angled exhaust, which will look more futuristic and shiny, and it'll go well with our downwards tilted front. Now this stacked shawling, we're going to have another set of shawls, and that's going to be this outer area. So let's go ahead and set this up. And you just go away for a moment. So to get this working, we're going to want to pull this out to here and then pull these down like this and up like this. This will give us roughly the right shape, but you can see that we are still not... see, I was measuring it against non-existent values. We need to pull this out like this. There, that's better. Little bit too far. Well, let's take a look, because our sausage has to be the right shape. We have two options here. It can either be 3 meters wide or it can be 4 meters wide. Either one is going to take us adjusting the rest of the engine's scale. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and punch out this selection. Take this guy and just scale it up so that it is the right size to fit within a 4 meter shawl. And that would be like this. There we are. And then we go back in here, and then we can rearrange this so that it is the right size. There we go. And then we can bring in this shawl like this, but we're not ready to do that yet because we have to bevel it. I know you're shocked. You're absolutely shocked that Craig would bevel something. But that is the truth. I am going to bevel it. There, it's nice and beveled now. And then we can extrude inwards like this. And then pull back inside. And it's just going to be a shawl, so there's no need to worry about it too much. Just fill it in like that. And as you might expect, we have some stuff going on here. The front end is tilted down. I didn't do that on purpose, and eventually that will be correct, but for now it makes more sense for us to not do that. We'll do that later on when we know the exact shape that we want. So this is gonna have to be maybe a 4x6, like this. And if that's the shape, then we can pull it forward. We can pull this forward too, like that. And what we're going to want is to have this exhaust also slanted to fit in with our overall slanted approach. So Control-Alt-Shift-S, and there we go. Pull it back. That's better than rotating because rotating will bring it down, see? Whereas skewing does not. All right, so if we shrink this just a touch and bring it in just a touch, it'll feel a little bit more natural. How are we going to integrate our friend, the intake? Well, it's a sausage-shaped situation, and it's not ever going to be pretty in my mind, but we have to try and make it as pretty as possible for the sake of not going bad. B. Wheatley says, "Hope all is going well. How far along do you think you are for this game? I am super excited for the Space Sims." Yep, I am to the point where you can play with the crew members in terms of watching them break shit. But because I had a bad week, I haven't thought about how to let you interact with the crew members. So that's what I'm going to have to think about. And until I come up with a good solution, I'm going to go ahead and develop other elements that we need for our game, such as a single-stage-to-orbit launch vehicle. So the idea here is that we're going to want to create a nice situation for our intake. The question is, do we want one intake or two? Because obviously the size is arbitrary. We could duplicate this and have two intakes. If we shrunk both of these intakes down, we could have two intakes. However, speaking physics, having these two intakes is not ideal because a big part of how these intakes work is they create this shock cone. And if there are two intakes right next to each other, that's two overlapping shock cones that aren't going to end up working very well. But on the other hand, only having one would feel kind of strange. Let's try something that might look okay. We'll try having an offset shock cone, like over here. Because that way we might be able to pull off something that looks decent. Right now we have a mirrored shawl. We're going to need to unmirror our shawl. Because otherwise we wouldn't be able to do the asymmetric approach. We're going to want to put in another cut. Here. Yeah, that's fine. Like so. And then what we'll want to do is bring this side forward like this. Yeah, something like that. Now we're going to need to have a circle. And we're going to need to rotate X 90, bring it over proper here. That's way too far to the side. That's probably about right. Shrink it a little bit. And then this is what we're going to use to integrate our engine into the surrounding scaffold. So if we do this, yeah, that'll work. So what we'll do is we will duplicate. I guess we don't need to do. We can extrude, and then we do Control-Alt-Shift-S, just tilt it like this, and then can extrude and Control-Alt-Shift-S. There we go. And you need to match up to that. Not perfectly. It doesn't really have to be perfect, but it would be nice if it was at least vaguely correct. Good. So we are, in fact, on a on an exact field here, so you can see we can line up perfectly, and that's good. Do that. There we go. And so, with that in mind, we can start to try and bridge the situation between our intake and the rest of our ship. And one of the things we're going to need to do is expand these. No, that's not it. And drag them into our situation. But we also need to create something that's a little bit different than this. So if we duplicate this stuff, we're going to need to create like a lip around the edge. I guess the best way to do that is to extrude again. Trying to figure out how to build this. So if we only select the top faces, we can extrude up and then rotate like this. That doesn't feel right. It's supposed to be more smooth. So let's undo. Let's take this perfect circle and try and build our lip. That time I rotated rather than skewing. And the idea is that we would want something like this, because that way we can merge our ship into it and have this lip over top, and that should look good. If we take this and we extrude inwards and backwards, like this, and then we can line these up and bridge the edge loops. That doesn't seem too bad. This is a little bit too tall. Like this, yeah, something like that. And this is also a little bit too tall. That's a little bit worthwhile. Yeah, something like that will do. We don't need this interior stuff. Boom, it's gone. But we do need the exterior stuff. So how do we merge this into an otherwise square box? Well, I'm not too good at that either. My specialty does not lie in merging topologies to the point where I frequently bemoan the fact that I don't have any idea how to do it. However, one of the most basic things you can do is to merge faces until you can either have a lip where they merge in just by bumping up against meshes, or you can merge the various faces together in a way that reduces the number of verts. I think what I'm going to do is create a buffer zone that is simpler, and that will allow us to move between them. So for that, we're going to try and make this work out to some sort of close degree. So if we drag this forward, you can see roughly where things have to start colliding. And then what we want to do is have this have some kind of buffer, some physical mesh buffer. And I think the easiest way to do that is to have another box. So we'll just duplicate this. Well, that's got too many here. So there, that's our box. Is that directly in the middle? Okay, that's fine. Pull it across here. Right. And then what we're going to want to do is break the front and back faces. So we extrude in. Individual origins, thank you. And then we can bridge the edge loops. And this creates just an arbitrary box. Now what we can do is we can bevel these edges. I know you're shocked. You are shocked. This man, he knows how to bevel? I've never heard of that before. like this. And the reason we've done that is simply because that way we can adapt it to fit in well with our other elements. So we can drag this out, for example, like that. And then we can take this and drag it to the other side like that. But I think that we made a mistake just a second ago. When I dragged this, I didn't drag it with a specific number of ticks in mind. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Obviously, this needs to be radically adjusted. It is very much in the wrong spot, but that's not too hard. We just drag it back properly. If we look at it from the side here, we could even skew it. So let's try that out. Just see whether or not it skews well. Not bad. Got to do some adjusting, though. Let's go ahead and grab this face here and skew it even further. Or just pull it back a little bit. Yeah, like this. That's fine. Right, so that... yeah, it doesn't look too crappy, but it doesn't look as good as it would if I knew what I was doing. As you may have guessed, I do not know what I am doing. So that is probably as good as I'm going to be able to get it. What a shame. Oh, that's not what I wanted. Edit, redo. Control-Shift-Z. Yeah, there we are. Great. I ruined it. Oh, okay. Well, what I can do to make this work a little bit better is just extrude this one more time so that they actually bump up against each other. You can still see inside the cowling, but I can always shrink this until you can't, and then give it a back face. Can anybody read Cyrillian letters? I can read Cerulean letters, but not Cyrillian. So another problem we've got is that the front is now too big, just in general. So what we're going to want to do is bring this down to a slightly more manageable scale, say 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.8. And then what we can do is we can grab all this stuff, scale 0.8, and get it to work with our newer, smaller engine. That seems fine. Pinkhair says, howdy. Pinkhair's actually been here since the beginning, according to Twitch, but he must not have been actually watching. So what we're going to want to do is shrink the rest of this so that it matches. And that means just bringing it down like this. And we're going to bring the top down with special attention, like this. Now if we do that, then what we've got is a situation where, let's go ahead and just grab the 3 here. Got a situation where it at least vaguely merges with the collar we've put on, just because I don't really have any better idea of how to flow that so that it looks right. Since it's off-center, there are a couple of options as to how we can put in the rest of this mesh. Previously, I was moving forward and coming out with a kind of a butt here. I think that that's not a bad idea, and it might be able to solve this so that we don't have to do this hack that I've put together. with the collar, because if this is a nice organic feeling, then we can use it to merge into another organic shape. So what sort of setup is ideal for us? Well, we want to have a nice curve, but I don't think we want it to be a perfect curve. I think we want it to move back like this. And then maybe have a little bit of an up like this. Now we're not going to be using all of these points. The back points are particularly useless. But that seems like it's a good organic flow, and we might be able to work that into our fundamental design over here. How in the world do you get this to flow into that? Now, that's something I've never been too good at, so if you guys have any solutions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to fake it. We can, boom, hook that up. If we bring this over to active element, then I can actually have that line up perfectly. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's unmask that. And then what we'll do is scale x0, bring it in, and then we'll reconnect them. Boom. So, if we bring stuff forward, I think that the best option is to have an organic curve coming out of here. Let's create a new circle. And then we'll move it over into the right spot. Like that. Alright, so with that in mind, we can just delete all of the elements that aren't going to be involved here. This is not my favorite way to delete stuff, but there's a lot of other points. I'm kind of modeling it all as one giant blob, so it's a little bit difficult to be more careful. Don't need that. I actually have no idea how to make spline patches work in Blender. Blender is still not, I'm still not very comfortable with it. So if you guys have specific Blender suggestions on how to do things right, I'm certainly open to hearing them. But for the moment, what I'm planning to do is just create patch, curved patch elements that have fewer faces than the one before. And I can do that by simply reducing the number of verts, dissolve verts, there we go. Like that. And then if you want to do this automatically, you can. You can just do bridge edge loops, and it'll go, oh, my best guess is that. And that's not too bad for our purposes, so we'll go ahead and call that an edge loop worth being bridged. One of the things that we need to do is patch this into the final set here. So if we do that here and here, and then here and here, you can see that down here it's actually too far forward. So we'll take this upper edge and just move it gently backwards. I'm hoping it's just your potato internet, Teokrib. And then we'll take these and move them gently upwards. Like that. We can repeat this same process down below, but it's a little bit more complex because we have a situation where we are looking at an interior curve. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just extrude some set of those interior faces and then rotate them. This is there's got to be a better way to do this. I just don't happen to know it. I could sculpt it and then try to retopo. Anyway, we can move these in so they're just a little bit more concave. And then we can repeat the process like that. And then what we'll want to do is figure out... I don't think this is going to work, guys. I've looked at it in my head, and I just can't figure out how this would end up working. It's not going to work. So let's try and figure out a different approach. One approach is we could go back to having a centered intake. Nothing wrong with that. It's just that I don't want to. What I had in mind with the off-center intake is it would be like a cool strut and then an intake. Let's go ahead and just block the strut out and see what it looks like when we think about it just as a cool strut. It would look a little bit like this. And then we grab this here and bring it forward a touch. That's the sort of thing I was thinking about building. And to be honest, I think that would probably look pretty good if I could get it to work out. Do I want this heavy, brutal shape? I think that I probably do. I think that this kind of aggressive shape works well for the kind of ship I'm trying to build, even if it doesn't work perfectly for actual physics. So what we'll do is we'll close this off here. We'll just flatten that whole area. And then we're going to try to make this shape work out. And I think that the first thing we're going to want to do is untilt this. And then what we can do is do a whole bunch of scaling and stuff just so that it works out nice and easy. So if we grab this and we move the whole thing out to the side like that, we can get the same sort of collar setup that we had before. And now you can see that it sort of encloses the other engine. The question is, what are we going to do with the underside? And I think that the answer there is that we're not going to want to have it hug there. So we can bring this back. What does it look like if we bevel it? What sort of shape do I want there? Well, one option is I can just bring it... Oh yeah, that's not too bad. Just bring it like this. Tools. Smooth faces. Auto smooth is on. Alright, so... don't think we want these faces to be smooth. I don't like this bottom element. I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. I think the problem is it's too low. So if I were to bring this up, should I bring it up even above that? No. Bring it up some, like to here. What happens if I cut it? I honestly can't tell if that's better or worse. I think it's worse. It's hard to tell though. This is not a terribly easy thing to figure out. Oh. Oh, this might work. So if we just cut like that, what happens if we put a cut here and a cut here? Hook these guys up. Hook these guys up. And then we can drag this down. Ah, that's what I need. I think I got a spare face in there somewhere. Yeah, that's not too shabby. That's a ticket. I can extrude this back. And then we can take this forward just a touch. Whoa, that's a lot bigger than I thought it was. There. Give it a little bit of mass there. But this is a little bit too low. Can I raise this whole thing? Does that work out? I think it does. All right, so that's sort of how I want it to look. Now this top part is starting to look a little bit silly. So if I were to bring it out like this, then what I could do is take this and extrude up, and then extrude out, and then extrude down, and then pull back. That's fine. And then I can just smooth this edge out by dragging it, and smooth this edge out by dragging it. Well, I won't claim that this looks like I had imagined it looking, but I also won't claim that it looks terrible. What do you guys think? This shape, does this look like a fun engine shape to put on your ship? Maybe I need to drive this front face down a little bit, just because the wing itself gets driven down. So if we were to rotate this a little, bring it down, and then we can take this and this and this and bring them all down. Yeah, that's a ticket. And we've got this spare point. Just drag that down. Oh. Pink Hair says it looks fun to him, which is good. He's not a bad judge of what looks fun. Alright. So if we do that as our engine, it's time to start to materialize it. So let's switch over to Material View. And right now, it's just this giant blob of no material. I'm going to go ahead and use some basic material setups here. We got hull, we got heavy hull, we got shiny chrome, and we got interior mechanisms. And because of that, all of these parts are going to get set up differently. First off, this cowling, I'm not even sure if this cowling is needed anymore. What does it look like when we don't have that cowling? Well, if we actually got rid of that cowling, yeah, we can get rid of that cowling, can't we? Sort of. I think it might be best to augment the cowling rather than get rid of it. So we can do that by pulling it out like this, and then pulling it down. Yeah, that's better. All right, so with that in mind, we're going to join this in. Boom. And get started. So this is going to be some stuff. We're going to have to work all of this stuff out here. So first, let's work on this part, which we can just select here and here, and then here and here, and that'll give us like all of it. We'll make that heavy hull, and all of this heavy hull, and this as well. Heavy hull, So we're going to go ahead and make this, and this, and this, and this, and this all shiny metal. Back here, we didn't actually integrate the engine yet. Boom. So we'll have this here be our... I think we need to select this little outside edge as well. Is that all selected correctly? Yeah. Those are going to be interior mechanisms. There we are. And all of these guys all the way around. So if we just select... it's hard when it's not... when it's tilted now. If we just select all of these guys, just brush through and deselect the faces later. Okay, that's not going to work. Can I do this? Oh, okay, there we are. That'll do. And that will be our... Perfect. That will also be our interior mechanisms. Hello? There we are. And then what we can do is select this guy, make him shiny metal. Actually, we should probably make these exterior elements shiny metal as well, but I don't know how to select them. We can use Shift-G, but I don't think there's going to be any... Yeah, that's not going to work. Oh, there we are. That'll work. Anything else selected? Okay, so there's some stuff up front selected that we want to deselect. Actually, we're making them shiny metal, and they're already shiny metal, so that's fine. Shiny metal. Here, 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 and here are all interior mechanisms. And around the sides... shiny metal. If we turn on our material view, we can see... Oh, brilliant, thank you. Well, that's the rendered view. There's our material view. So you can see what this will look like. The gray is actually much, much shinier than the white. And I know that sounds a little odd, but it is true. Those are going to be interior mechanisms again. There we are. This in here, interior mechanisms as well. So in order to make this feel a little bit better, let's do some last-minute beveling. These bevels are going to go away when we do a LOD stuff, so we're not too concerned. But let's just add in a little bit of cute little bevels to make it feel a little bit more future-y. And I don't like one thing. I don't like how far this goes off to the left. So let's just drag this back in line here. There we are. Even then, I can probably go further like this. Yeah, to be honest, I think that'll probably be fine. So last thing I want to do is put in some access hatches, which we're going to model into the actual object itself, just so that it feels a little bit better. We're going to go ahead and bevel this, and then what we can do is have that bevel be where we put our line. So we'll make this hole here, and put heavy hull around the edge of this, or shiny metal even. And that way we have a little access hatch. We're going to want another access hatch or two. Let's put one down here behind this element. Have a big one. I want to do a loop slide. Well, you know what? We can just put in a loop here. There's no reason to be shy. It's not like that's high density. And that's fine. And then we'll go ahead and switch over to line view and bevel these two. Nope. Call that shiny metal. There. I think I want this front tip to be a little bit more. What is that white stuff inside there? Oh, I see. Call this interior mechanisms. There's still white stuff in there. Oh, is that the front of the plane here? I bet it is. Might be that. But I think it is whatever the front plane of this thing is. Whatever is described by this loop. There. Is there a face there? No. Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay, I don't know why I couldn't select it before. That's all good. Now, if we switch over to material mode, it's still got some white back there. Oh, that must be the undercarriage. Well, that's fine. I'm not going to be too worried about it right now. Malsbeer says you're going to model out LOD versions of all the meshes. Not at all. I use a whole bunch of shortcuts and stupid tricks. So I will have LOD versions, but I'm not going to be modeling them all. So let's go ahead and unhide everybody and switch over to rendered mode. And we can see what's on the slab. All right, I've got to move the ground plane down a little bit. It's just a little close. So this is the basic idea of this engine. And of course, you would be using symmetrical elements to it. So your ship would always have at least two of these. Currently, there's no texturing or any sort of LODs at all. Oh, and look, I can see here. That's why I didn't do it. This does need to be a hull. That's just all there is to it. This, however, can be an interior mechanism. It's also a little bit low. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. There it is. There, perfect. All right, so let's just go ahead and slap in a simple UV unwrap. Doesn't really matter at the moment because we're just going to be looking at it. Let's go down into our test scene and pull it in and see what it looks like when we're actually in the game world. Oh, Pink Air says, I'd remove the cowling and straighten the ring and nose inside. Funnily enough, depending on how the vertex normals are set up, the extra bevels don't even add as many verts as you might think. Pink Air says that he'd remove the cowling and straighten up the rings and nose inside. You have to be more specific. If you mean have them go straight, as in not being pointed down, that's not an option. The actual supersonic jets need to have downwards pointing noses, downwards pointing intakes. That's one of the main things about why it's hard to make them look decent. They all have the floppy sausage engines, and I described this before, but you weren't here, so let me describe it to you again. This is what the actual Saber engine looks like. It looks like a floppy sausage, and this isn't even severe enough to reflect how it actually looks, because it's more like this. It's this floppy sausage, and that's why when you're building spaceships out of them, you have to be careful to figure out how you want them to look, because floppy sausages are not the most endearing. So what I've done is I've sharpened it up and made it into the shape of a box cutter, or a cereal box, a box cutter. So cereal box shapes are ideal for our modular elements, and that's why I did it that way. Pink Air says, hard edge naturally is represented in Unity as a duplicated vert. The number of verts is less important to me than the number of faces, as long as you don't hit the 65,000 limit, at which point the number of verts becomes more important. Come on. It's not that big a file. It's really not. Let's pop on over to test. Doop, 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 doop. Here we are in test. Yay. Testing, as you might understand, is just a scattered piece of crap. It doesn't need to be anything useful. No one's ever going to see it, so we can do whatever we want, like dumping in a new element. So if we open up our models and we pop on down into our ship models and pull in the new Aeroskip T1, this is how all of that stuff looks on first pass import. You can see that it has concepts of the heavy hull and that sort of stuff, and it automatically does some of this texturing for us. However, the texturing is a little bit aggressive just due to the density required here. Let's take a look at some of these materials that are not as they should be. First off, we've got this interior mechanisms. This is supposed to be a very dark masking visual, so we're going to make it nice and dark. And the shiny metal is supposed to be metal, so we'll pull up the smoothness and the metallicness. And you can see that they're starting to look more correct. However, we don't have any decent visuals for them. Now, for smooth metal, we probably aren't going to need any. For the interior mechanisms, we might as well set ourselves up with an albedo mask, just because it will chop up the interiors just a little bit and make it look nice when people start to look and try and see what's in that darkness. Oh, Pinkhair was still talking about the edge beveling. Area weighted normals in Unity have this problem where you would have to write your own shader. You couldn't just do it using any sort of mono behavior or special mesh. You would need a shader that would interpret a mesh as having weighted mesh normals, or weighted vert normals rather, and that's beyond me. I'm not so good at that stuff. But what I think I'm going to do right now is increase the density and redo some of the UV weighting so that this doesn't look quite so crap. There's a lot of tricks that you can use to do that, but the most basic one we're going to do now is just to have it so that they're not all stacked up on top of each other. And that means this and this will extrude them separately, or project them separately, and then this we will also project separately. And that will keep them from having a lot of density. It means they'll have a lot of overlapped elements, though. These are not going to be a unique texture, which is fine the way we're doing it, so I'm not too concerned. Grind, grind, grind. Taking your time. Come on. I guess it's bigger than I thought because I put in a whole bunch of test things. So this heavy hull, you can see that it's using an unusual albedo map, and I'm going to go ahead and replace that with a standard one because the unusual one looks bad. That's a little bit better. And we'll go ahead and bring up the tiling so that it can be a little bit more interesting. The hull tiling is set to 2. Let's see what happens if we punch it up to 3. Okay, so there's something screwy going on here because this didn't move. Oh, normal map tiling. Oh, so the problem was that the normal map had different tiling than the other map. So that was why it looked so weird. But here we have an issue where our setup isn't quite working for how we want it to look. So we're going to go in and we're just going to pop on over to the UV map. Now, if you were doing this properly, you would do this another way. We're not going to be doing it properly, so we're just gonna wrangle it until it doesn't look like it's too crappy. Another thing we could have done is just rotate it at 90 degrees, which is what we'll do if this doesn't work out. Pinkhair says it's a real pain in the butt actually making, since my modeling software doesn't support it, so having Unity to do it would be easier than hacking Lightwave to. No idea. If Lightwave could do it, you wouldn't be able to export those models into Unity anyway. I mean, you could, but they would lose their custom weighting. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. No, that's the save. That's this. my texture naturally has a flow, and that flow means that if it is cutting across your sculpted in elements, you just rotate it 90 degrees, and the flow will naturally line up. In theory. This is not how you would normally do UV unwrapping, just so you know. This is how I do it when I'm just building stuff as fast as possible. Ah, there we are. So I think that if we were to bring it down a little bit, it would actually end up working fine. Pink Hair says that's not true at all. They import into Unity just fine. Are we still talking about weighted edge normals because our weighted vertex normals because Unity doesn't support them as far as I know. It supports normals, but it doesn't support changing how much priority those normals have over the course of the face, as far as I know. Let's just massage the hull until it is in the right spot. That's a little bit better. I think that we're going to have better action if we actually make this unwrap more aggressively with its exact layout. So if we were to unwrap this, for example, and then rotate 90, and then we were to unwrap these guys, and rotate 90. I think that would work out better. But the problem is they're skewed. So if we were to take a look at that again, Pink Air says you can explicitly set the normal of each vertex. Yes, but you can't tell it that you want those normals to be weighted across the surface of the face, which is what I thought you were trying to say. Unity doesn't understand the concept of a normal being weighted towards the edge faster or slower than any other normal. As far as I know, it has no way to represent that. Nope. That should make it so that it flows more properly down the face. Let's find out. Yeah, you're sending me links to things that have been nicely hardened. Their surfaces have been set up. I guess I don't understand. I think you have it backwards. I mean, setting the vertex's normal direction based on the area of the faces surrounding it. Maybe I am thinking of it backwards. I am certainly not an expert on them. No, these are much too big. Grind, grind, grind. Go grind, grind, grind. Grind, grind, grind. Grind, grind, grind. It's a long import. There we are. I think that's probably good enough. But we have a couple of things we want to adjust here, and one of them is this guy, which we are going to want to have merge in with the rest of the face here. So, just bring that in and scale it down. Doesn't have to be perfect. There we go. And we also need to do the sides and the bottom. Excuse me. Pink Hair is still talking about it. I want to implement a relatively simple modeling operation as a pre-process when importing the meshes so I can use it without jumping through an extra piece of software. Well, that part's really, really easy. If you know the operation that you'd like to do, there is actually a full dedicated element that you can use called the import preprocessor, I think. I can look it up if it's necessary. And that's pretty easy. There's even one that says before import mesh. So you could do it like that. There's no particular reason to... I mean, if you know exactly what you need to do, you don't need to be great at coding. You just need to know how to code the mesh normals the way you want them to be coded. If you're good at enough to do that, you can use the asset preprocessor. Yep. I can't use it there. That's fine then. I won't bother. There we are. And that should do. The example code I've found is for Max script. Well, in that case, it's probably in Python, and you'd have to translate it into C#. These are things I've done lots, so I'm not too worried about the fact that, you know, whether it's possible or not. It's definitely possible. If you need help on exactly what you're trying to do, let me know, and I can try and hook you up with functional advice, since there are things that that work. All right, so that doesn't look so great. I guess it looks good enough, except for the edges are really, really terrible. All right, so if we scale y0 and scale y0 and scale y0 and scale y0, that will hopefully give us what we want. Erdroy says, talking about programming and modeling, huh? I'm currently implementing CSG into our in-game editor. That's neat. Definitely go ahead and use anything that exists. Because there are a lot of times when you'll find that someone has already written exactly what you need. Okay, Pink Hair, if you do need help, feel free to, tweet at me or whatever. I don't get many ats on my tweets, so if you do tweet at me, I'll definitely see it. You can also email me. I think you have my email. All right, so this is pretty close to how I want it to look in terms of the overall fundamental look of the thrusters. I don't want to tell you that this is going to be the final version, but I think that that's fine for now. So the idea here is that if you had a thruster, and you were saying, duplicate thruster here, one of them would be inverted. So you'd have like scale of negative 0.6. I didn't realize they were at 0.6 scale. We're going to have to fix that. And then you'd have your ship actually between them. Like this here is the main cockpit, and you have this thing here. And you got this thing here. And that sort of look is what I'm going for. Obviously, this is still just prototyping phase, but that's what I want the engines to feel like. Oh, that's so right now these engines are 0.6. They're 0.6 scale, and they are 4 meters wide and roughly 6 meters long. Pink Hair says that he doesn't have Twitter. That's fine. You don't have to get Twitter. I think you know my email. And there we are. The only thing left is that the center needs to be updated so that it feels right. And that's going to be maybe here. Because that way when you stick it on your ship, it will feel like it has a root node. So if you look at real versions of SSTOs, they're basically like little Tylenol pills with sticks, and then they have engines on the end that look like floppy sausages. So they're not the most pretty of elements. We're going to go ahead and pretend that we don't have to do that, and we're going to do some alternative approaches instead, and hopefully they'll still feel pretty good. So if we take a look, something like this. Yeah, and then of course we would need wings. Now the wings on an SSTO are typically non-existent. They're just the tiniest little pylons that barely exist at all. And that's why they tend to land with rather a lot of crunch. The space shuttle has the largest wings of any aerospace, anything that can go into space. It has the largest wings. All of these subsequent designs have very, very small wings. I think we're going to go ahead and presume that we want a middle ground. So instead of just a pole as a wing, we're going to have a wing, but it's going to be quite long and sharp. Now the question is, what do we want to do in terms of functionality with our wings? We can have a wing that is just a wing, and I think we're going to need one. But we should also have the option of putting things in our wings. For example, landing gear, missiles, sensors, things that can fold out of our wing. I think that's probably a good idea. The other thing to keep in mind is that the wings on SSTOs are at the bottom of the ship, generally speaking. So they'd be down here, or even further down like this, rather than being in the middle. Now that's going to end up being player preference, but if we think about the things that you can mount into the wing, we're going to want to have things that you can mount into the wing with the understanding that they're going to be near the bottom of the ship. And Pink Hair says 10 out of 10, I would trim my beard with it. Yeah, it does look a little bit like a face shaving razor, doesn't it? So we don't have a good glass shader yet. We do. We have loads. But this particular material has just been imported. We don't have it set up properly yet. Let's go ahead and make the cloth this pink color just so that we can see it. And then when we get this glass, we'll make it transparent. Using a simple fade effect. No biggie. There we are. We can create an actual glass thing later. There is a glass shader that comes included with Unity, but it's really weird. Let's take a look here. Glass stain. No, that's not it. Shader Forge probably has a pretty good glass, but I don't think I have one. I have a refraction. Yeah, that's actually very similar to how the Unity one looks. So you can see that you can get a sort of glassy look to it, but there's no color. It's just this clear glass, and that feels a little bit wrong to me. I like it better when there's a color. So what other options do we have? UI, unlit, VR, sprites, Skelly. You know what? I think that's probably fine. We'll leave it like this. Sorry, that's not what I meant to say. It was probably fine like this. We'll leave it like this. There we are. Because it fits in well with the more smooth sort of feel that we were going for. And this is the sort of ship that I'm hoping to have you build for SSTO flights. What do you guys think? Is that the sort of ship you'd like to build? Pinkhair likes the Unity stained glass with a suitable texture. Well, let's find out here. If we pop open the glass, the Unity stained glass approach. Where was it? FX, glass, Unity stained map. So right now it's got nothing because it doesn't have a suitable texture. If we look at suitable textures, this is a distortion texture. This is a tint color. I don't know if I have like a blue material to use as a tint color. I mean, I could use a normal map. They're blue. Terakb says that the colorless glass is fine and that the ship looks pretty cool. That's always good to hear. Whenever you're building stuff like this, it's going to end up looking boxy. And one of the things that I have as a goal for this ship is I want it to look less boxy. Let's go ahead and just put in... Okay, so we can get that... We can get that distortion using the stained glass. I don't have a flat blue texture, unfortunately. Water. I've got a water texture. Well, that's a little bit aggressive, isn't it? Probably just need to create a light blue texture. I just don't have one at the moment. That's close enough. So the problem with ships when you're creating these ships is that they end up looking pretty boxy. The modules end up being boxy modules, as you can see. But there are options as to trying to make them look less boxy. And the question is, how do they butt up against other objects of the same sort? So right now, for example, this object has the wing has this exactly square shape. But if we were to create a variant, and this variant, we could pull this forward edge down and forward, not like that, like this, and create a really, really aggressive forward angle like so. That would break up the profile of the module. And then if we were to save that and go back over into Unity, let me show you the difference between this module and that module. Geometry distortion might look better if you're going that route. The normal map is kind of aggressive. Well, I can reduce the distortion from the normal map pretty easily. It's just a slider, so I'm not too worried about that. Eventually, I'll have to use an actual glass shader of some sort. I'm not terribly concerned at this phase because I'm still struggling to get the geometry right. And I don't know how to get it to do decent geometry distortion. That's a little bit difficult. So there it is. So if we take a look, the difference between the two is that this ship would have a much more aggressive forward cant. You can see that? So if we were to move this existing one back and delete this guy, and then duplicate this, invert, move it into place, you can see how that looks a lot less boxy. It feels like there is an actual sweep involved, even though it's still a square object. You can't get away with this in some games. For example, in Space Engineers, the amount of space that an object takes up is a voxel chunk. And if you take up an awkward amount of space, then you're butting into other voxels. But the thing about my particular element here is I don't have to worry about that because I'm allowing elements to interact, to overlap without any sort of penalty or accusation. So this is a perfectly fine setup for our ship. The only issue is that we would want to move it back a notch so that the engines would have a free run. If the engines were actually inside of another thing, that would cause an error, because, you know, you'd just be blasting the back of your ship off. But this is perfectly acceptable from our perspective. So because of that, I am allowed to break the standard boxy shapes into other sorts of shapes. And that would allow me to create some more sweeping elements. How these elements would interact with each other is the difficult question, because these elements, how would you include more than 2 sets of engines, for example? Would you just take this guy and move him up? Because that looks kind of dumb. Would you, say, invert him like this? Oop, that's not proper. Because that would look okay, but it's wrong. I guess that doesn't look too bad. If you think in terms of space, maybe that's okay. In fact, we could try and invert them, like drag this one up and that one down. That actually looks pretty cool. But another option is that I could have a slider of some sort, where you could adjust these meshes so that they wouldn't have the same shape all the time. And in that case, you could do something like, just get rid of this cereal box for a second, like have that below and this above. And they'd be the same functionality, but they'd look different. So they would stack in a way which feels a little bit more appealing. And you could have something like this. Or whatever you're trying to accomplish. And of course, there's not any reason why you can't rotate them. The air intakes need to be pointed downwards in reality, but in our space game, sky's the limit. You can do whatever the hell you want. So I'm just kind of playing around with the part, making sure that it fits into my ideal here, trying to figure out how I want things to look. So Pink Hair is talking a little bit here, and I'm sorry, I've been totally ignoring you. Pink Hair says that the normal map is aggressive because I'm using a normal for cliff faces. Yeah, I just picked one at random. It's a very versatile shader since pretty much everything is defined by the textures you use. I use it with a render texture to make dynamic ripples. Didn't even take any code. Oh, that's a really cool idea. I'm not going to use it though because it would be a little bit expensive. Pink Hair says, how about attaching the angles at an angle? How about attaching the engines at an angle? Which I think I just showed a little bit of, but we can do a lot more experiments to try and figure out if this basic approach is good or bad. Let's turn the thruster back on here. So we've tried a couple of angles, like 90 degrees, but 90 degrees isn't the only sort of angle we've got. For example, we could cut it in like this, and then we could take the lower guy, and cut him in like that, and then we could bring him up to the same. Now, in terms of how this works for, you know, air intakes and physics, not great. But in terms of how it looks for our video game, that's actually pretty cool, don't you think? We could bring him even further in like this. We can delete this guy, and then duplicate these guys, and then invert them. Oh, they inverted funny. And then just drag them to the right location. Something like that. Oh, I've got them backwards. Oh, that's fine. We can unbackwardsify them. There you go. To be honest, I think that does not look bad. I mean, this element here is a temporary one because I was doing something and it didn't work out. But the basic idea here, you can do a lot with this stuff, and I think it doesn't look bad at all. B. Wheatley says it's a space delivery vehicle. That's pretty much the case. Space pizza delivery vehicle. That's pretty much the case. The whole idea of a single stage to orbit is that they are the cheapest way to get shit into space. And this particular arrangement of engines is very much an Earth atmosphere arrangement. You need oxygen. If you don't have oxygen in your atmosphere, then these sorts of engines are no good. But I think that I'm going to go with the extended one I just created kind of on the fluke. This one is definitely the one that feels better. So we'll name it. These are not serial box thrusters 001, although that is a funny name for them. We need something that says it's a Sabre engine, but isn't copyrighted as Sabre. Kerbal says Rapier. To fill that out, what's the third of the triad? It's Sabre, Rapier, and... I can't remember the third. Let's look it up. Sabre, Rapier... there's like a third of the 3 primary blades for fencing. But all I'm getting is Sabre versus Rapier. Fencing blades. Oh, épée. Foil, épée, and saber. So Rapier isn't even one of them. Well, calling it a foil has other terms, so I guess épée is probably best, don't you think? Yeah, épée. So this is going to be the épée engine. Épée thrusters. That seems like it will work. Shall we work on an engine? I'm getting really hungry now, though. I'm not sure if I will live to finish off... I mean a wing. I'm not sure if I will live to finish off a wing, but let's at least give it a shot. So when we're creating a wing, when you look at the wings that actual SSTOs use, we look at the images for SSTO, the real ones use basically just nubs. You got a lot of Kerbal showing up when you search for SSTO. It's mostly images of Kerbal, which is hilarious. But that might be because Google knows that I have played Kerbal in the past. But they're normally just these little fins. So that's what we'll start with. We'll start with a pretty standard-looking little fin. So if we were to scale this down on the z-axis, the idea of a fin is... they have this, they're mostly for vector control surfaces rather than for lift. So what you end up with is something that comes out sort of like this and then curls around at the tip, which I guess we can just keep extruding. Should we make it 3 meters wide? That's probably about right. Something like that, yeah. Now, the thing is that it doesn't sweep straight out. It also these faces actually curve back, so... Hello. Oh. Oh, come on. You only work when you're not at that one angle? You suck. For some reason, the shearing command doesn't work when you're looking at it from above. Brilliant. Let's go ahead and delete these 2 edge loops. Try and get our overall structure correct first. Guard says, woo, I showed up for one while I'm actually on. Hello. Funny thing is, I said literally 5 seconds ago that I was so hungry I probably wouldn't be able to go for very much longer. So hello! So what we're going to do is put in 2 cuts and then just place the cuts so that they... Put in a 3rd cut here, and then we'll just adjust the front of the wing so that it has the shape I want it to have, which is... I'm not done yet. I'm going to do as much modeling as I can until my stomach starts to get out of control here. And then we'll bevel this, like so. And that's pretty much the shape that SSTO winglets have. Now there's still a couple of things we have left to do before we can call that a winglet. One is that we're going to cut it down the middle and then delete the bottom half, like so. And then we will turn on mirroring. not masking. Mirroring with a Y, Z, like so. And that's the reason for that is because they get narrower as they go towards the tip, and we don't want to have to worry about trying to figure that out on our own. So Control-Alt-Shift-S, and why is it not working anymore? This worked earlier in the day. Now all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore? What the hell? What broke? Okay, so it wants to shear on that axis. Why? You jerk. Okay, just pressing Y will make it shear on a different axis. That's fine. So there we go. We can just bring it into our angle. That's probably a good angle. And we'll drag it down like that. Interesting. That is not what I expected to have happen. That didn't shear. That sheared on multiple axes, didn't it? Fascinating. So if I were to try and shear it again, and I hit Y again, so you can see that it's actually shearing on multiple axes. So if I hit X, it'll stop shearing on... is this rotated? Did I accidentally rotate something? You know what? I'm just going to rotate and then scale it on the X-axis. It's easier. Is this not the X-axis? What did I do? I'm sorry, guys. I am so hungry that it's screwing with my ability to think, apparently. There we are. Come on, just a little bit less. Good enough. Surely I have an apple or a banana or something in my kitchen. Actually, I had better check out delivery. Hold on. I don't, at the moment, have any food in the house except for some frozen vegetables, which are what I'm going to eat as soon as I sign off. But I'm getting a whole bunch delivered, a whole bunch of food delivered. Not like order out, I'm getting ingredients delivered. And it's supposed to come any moment now, so that will be a nice thing. Hold on. People have started to talk about random stuff here. I remember when I was a bachelor, there was no fruit to be found. I actually usually don't keep fruit just because it goes bad faster than I can eat it. Monk of Time says, is there a good way of sending you feedback about the alpha build? Sure. First realize that the alpha build is very much, it's not even an alpha build. It's a prototype. It's a demo of a particular piece of tech. But if you do want to send feedback, you can either email me or post it to the forum for that game. Down at the bottom of the game, there's a forum. If you don't feel like getting a name on the forum, you can either email me or tweet at me, or even leave comments on my YouTube videos for it. Yeah, the best way is to get on the itch.io forum for the game. But I understand if you don't want to, because it requires signing up for something. Guard says, "What the ass, man? Okay, you signed up for one of those delivery services for groceries. I actually signed up for Blue Apron, which isn't exactly a delivery service for groceries. Yeah, that seems okay." So what we're going to do now is bring in a cut here, like that. And then this is going to be our flap. Now we're not actually going to have the flap animate, but we do want to have it noticeable as a flap. So you know what that means? I'll give you one guess. Guess what that means, everybody? Beveling. It means beveling. There we are. think that maybe softening these edges is probably also a good idea. There we are. Milk of Time says, thanks, will do. I actually look forward to any feedback people want to give me, but you do have to realize it's just a tech demo. Almost every part of it has to have its UI rearranged and shit like that. But I'm always curious to hear from everybody. Guard says, how is it, or is this your first one? This is my first one, so I don't know how it is. But I heard nothing but good, so... You know, obviously, that's not bad. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and sharpen this up a little bit tighter. Tighter. There we are. That's better. All right, and then we can take this front edge here and just bevel it separately, just to get a little bit of a crease there. And then we can pull this forward. There we go. Actually, probably pull it forward more than that, and then bevel that. Oh, I can't. Can't bevel that because it's a mirrored object. That's fine. I'll go ahead and pull this forward. Something like that. It's an interesting crease. I can probably massage that. Yeah. That's probably not too bad. Monk of Time says, feedback's more about the character creation system. All right, feel free to tell me all you'd like to tell me. The characters are currently just a throwaway mesh with throwaway customizations, but I am eager to hear what sort of things you want to tell me about, what you think about it, because the basic concept is pretty much what I plan to go with. So if the basic concept has something wrong with it, I definitely want to hear that. But I also want to hear your concerns in general, because it'll tell me what I have to do right when I get around to doing it right. So there we have an SSTO wing. Very, very basic setup. And this sort of miniature winglet is the sort of thing that most games that do space games, they have these. These are pretty common. But we're also going to be doing some kind of fat functional winglet. We'll have to think about the best way to handle that. For now, however, let's set up our mounting brace. All right. Let's unwrap everything, and let's start to set up some materials. So we're going to have a hull material, and then we're going to have a heavy hull, and that's how I do it. So our heavy hull is going to go on the back, I guess. Do we want it to just be the winglet is heavy hull and everything else is hull? How about this is also heavy hull? Yeah, that'll do. When we look at this in rendered mode, that's how it looks. Maybe the fin should be a little bit bigger. In order to make the fin bigger, I'm basically going to have to redo the whole thing, aren't I? Maybe the fin shouldn't be any bigger. We'll leave it like that for now. Later on, we might make a new version that's got a better fin. All right. So we'll go ahead and call this winglet. Now, the thing about the winglet in this case is it's not actually correct. This is not how we want it to be oriented, because it will screw up our mirroring if it's oriented like this. We actually have to have it oriented like this in order for the mirroring to work out. So that's what we'll do. We'll go ahead and change its rotation and then save. Let's hop on into our game world here. Guard says, you're making me want to get into Blender. I keep telling myself I'll eventually learn to model again. Well, Blender is a pain in the ass for modeling. It's not my favorite modeling program, but it is free. Grind to grind to grind. I'm going to go ahead, go back into Unity, go back into YouTube and delete the video saying that I'm streaming, because I'm going to stop any minute here. All of these cargo box thrusters went away because I renamed it. That's fine. Let's go ahead and grab the new guy, bring him over, move him back. And you can see that this cuts into our windows. So there's a couple of ways around that. One is to move it out, because obviously this is not going to cut into your windows. Another is to move it down. Another is to move it up. Now, if you move it up, then it blocks off the windows altogether. If you move it down, moving it down that far is a little bit much. If I were to go into the snap settings and change them to 0.5, which is more in tune with what you'd have for a ship this size, that would be more like what you'd see. Even that's a little bit low. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull it out. And then we'll duplicate and flip and move to the other side like so. Yeah. Let's bring over this winglet here. Move it back. That feels a little small. I can duplicate it and then flip it and move it over. Okay, so I screwed that up because that's not X anymore. It's Z there. All right, so that should do, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to increase the size of that winglet. It's a little too small for our needs, so we'll scale it up by 1.5 and then save that. And see how that looks. Guard says he's using Blender because it's free, and Erdroy says I'm done for now. See ya. See ya. I'm pretty close to done myself. I'm just taking a look at how the wing sizes look. I'm also thinking about ways to make these modular boxy elements feel good. And I'm thinking that I can use the same basic technique of having projections that float outside of the bounding box. I think that that won't look too bad, and it will allow us to have elements that are a little bit more natural. Okay, so come on. So while this seems to be the right layout, I guess it's not too bad. In reality, these would probably be tilted down like this. And maybe even moved another step down. That doesn't feel too bad. Sorry, Guard, you can switch to Twitch and back all you'd like, but at some point I'm just not going to be here for you. Because I'm really hungry, and I have to actually cook something if I want to eat. So I am going to sign off now, leave you with this beautiful spaceship that I have put together. Remind you that while none of these pieces have been set up to actually have functional roles yet, I already have all that stuff in place, and it's relatively straightforward. So I will see all of you folks at a later time. I'll be here again on Wednesday. And I'll probably do a lot of stuff off camera because, you know, there's a lot of stuff to do. Have a good one, everybody, and I'll see you in next week. Or this week, because it's Sunday.